Hey, it's Katie Moran. Welcome to the Artistic Spirit podcast. Today I'm here with Sophie Delfeus, and she is a passionate advocate for personal growth, community, and cultural immersion. She is the founder and CEO of the Cultivating the Collective, a visionary company with a mission to end loneliness by creating immersive experiences that foster community and provide tools for living purposefully. Sophie's journey is rooted in her extensive experience creating spaces of support, beginning with the first generation college students as a first year at Amherst College. Cultivating the Collective specializes in crafting multi night group trips, immersive day trips, retreat coordination for entrepreneurs and their communities, and conference design. Their innovative approach not only strengthens individuals, but also empowers communities with a commitment to giving back through supporting local business owners. With nearly 3 in 5 US adults considered lonely and social isolation impacting lives and workplaces, cultivating the collective's work is more crucial now more than ever. A writer and facilitator, she leans on language and dialogue to make meaning of life and her lived experiences while helping others do the same. In her spare time, you can find her taking photos and collaging. Thank you so much for coming on today, Sophie.
Katie, thanks so much for having me.
I can't wait to hear this. What does community mean to you?
I love this question. For me, community is really around surrounding yourself with people that allow you to just be yourself. Also, I think people that allow you to feel safe.
Mhm.
And what I realize is it really starts with having a safety with yourself first.
Mhm.
One of the things that I found is I've been in plenty of pockets of people and groups, and there's ways that even within spaces, I can feel alone. And part of it is like not feeling okay showing parts of who I am.
Mhm.
So I've really dedicated a big part of my life to kind of identifying and uncovering places where um, maybe I was nervous to be okay with this or I was embarrassed, and really trying to find pride in who I am because I'm the
Mhm.
only one that I've got
Mhm.
for the long haul. Um, and from that, I've been able to re-enter those same spaces, but also being open to connect, because I've seen that people are struggling with that on their own, in their own way.
I love this idea of being who you are, and how can community help people overcome social isolation, and also how does it impact mental health?
You know, it's so funny. We're in 2024 now, and I think the effects of the pandemic still are with us. That was
Mhm.
such a life-altering time in big ways, in the sense that the ways that people would gather or the opportunities to be in shared space with folks got ripped away.
Mhm.
And I think after that, part of it was um, that there was so much tragedy, there was so much kind of confusion, and
Mhm.
so many of us had to kind of figure it out
Mhm.
within our four walls of, or if we were lucky to have more.
Mhm.
And when I think about the impact that had, you miss so much, right? I
Mhm.
know what it's like. I've constantly lived in other countries and would be confined to catching up with my loved ones and friends through FaceTime. And I think about those little pockets of time where you try and catch them up on everything, but things get missed. And I
Mhm.
think what happened post-COVID during that time really was us skipping over some of those things, partially because We know a lot of people have other things going on, but there's
Mhm.
grief that didn't get named. Maybe things we're still processing that maybe we didn't want to be a bother to people because
Mhm.
we know so much has been moving in all of our lives. So when I think about that impact, I
Mhm.
know that isolation feels differently after that time
Mhm.
because it's almost as if people didn't get to see us during our COVID period, right? We didn't
Mhm.
actually, our friends didn't know us then. Our families, if they were living a certain distance away, there were aspects of us that they didn't get to receive and really get to witness us through. So when I think about community past this period, it's really been about being open to share again, being open to be seen again, and honestly, not being afraid to share about what that impact you're still recovering from. I think sometimes there's like this shame around, oh, we're XYZ years past the pandemic, but it
Mhm.
it really is kind of like a break. And now this is a different type of reality that we live. But I think part of it really has to do with letting ourselves um, live in how we've been impacted.
Mhm.
And when I think about the opportunities for community, I think it's also just a patience that's needed. Um, a patience with ourselves in how we oh. I I'm sighing because I'm thinking about what patience has looked like in my own journey.
Mhm.
Um, Post-pandemic in my own life, I remember feeling frustrated about living in my tiny New York apartment, frustrated in my career. Also thinking, how are we expected to perform in business as usual
Mhm.
in these circumstances? And I've always been somebody who thought there must be a better way. There must be a different type of balance that one can assemble for themselves. And some folks say balance doesn't exist, it's harmony that we seek.
Mhm.
So I'm okay with that term. But I really feel like my mental health was impacted because of kind of this focus on producing, where really I needed to be okay looking at who I was. And what that looked like personally was making a move. I actually moved to Mexico, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, in August of 2021. And that really embarked on a choice that I made out of my mental health. And it was a risk because
Mhm.
I said goodbye to the community that I knew in New York, or at least see you later. And I really opened myself up to what that could look like in a completely different place, starting anew.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you touch on this big and deep topic, and this comes back to what you say about what you think community means and how it comes back to this idea of safety. And during the pandemic, community didn't mean safety, and like isolation meant safety. So, what do you think it looks like for collectively us to kind of like heal this idea that community is safe and that isolation isn't necessary?
I really love what you pulled out of that.
Mhm.
Because I think in that moment, it really was about what was the thing we had to fear. And it was
Mhm.
fearing this thing that basically we didn't know where where we could be, contaminated from.
Mhm.
And I think post kind of being out of this realm of immediate kind of threat, now what it has looked like is I think in that isolation, we kind of packed up more of ourselves than we were used to before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Packing up maybe the struggles we were dealing with, mental health. It seems like everyone has something that they're grappling with, some struggle that they're going through. And it's easier to kind of just like not talk about it, maybe out of fear of overwhelm or maybe not being able to control it after the fact
Mm-hmm.
after you give it so much airtime. But I think what has helped me in terms of reconnecting with community was recognizing, I remember being in Puerto Vallarta, and being like feeling
Mm-hmm.
alive, being in community with people who also were kind of curious and looking for something else, looking for another way to just exist.
Mm-hmm.
And coming out of this period of isolation, I think it was people recognizing what do they need to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think folks chose was joy. Also,
Mm-hmm.
like being more in pursuit of I think witnessing their process and recognizing that it actually doesn't take as much as one would think to feel um to feel light, to feel in connection. But I think part of it has to do with also more self-understanding.
Mm-hmm. What is the role of joy in community?
I think joy gets to be that space where celebration can come, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
I spoke earlier around finding a pride in oneself, right? Things
Mm-hmm.
that one maybe wasn't sure of because maybe they thought they were the only one.
Mm-hmm.
Or for example, I can even name in my own life, I have always been that person who, when it came to travel, for example, there were folks that maybe really wanted to think about travel as I have this list of all the places I want to hit when it comes to countries. And then me, I was always this person, no, I want to go deep. I
Mm-hmm.
want to
Mm-hmm.
experience, I want to sit with the grandmothers, I want to sit with the aunts, and I want to have that experience. And I remember for a while, I thought, is it just me? Right? And feeling kind of shame behind that. And when I found people that were looking to, you know, pick up their roots in the states where they came from
Mm-hmm.
and then come to another country and like whether it's investing in the way of buying property or even just like signing a 1 year lease, there's a way that they really um kind of rooted themselves. And that felt really exciting. And that's something that made me feel alive and no longer strange because I've been in so many spaces where I was the only one. I think community really has this opportunity to show you there are like interests, there are that there's people to when experiences are difficult, like navigating any big transition, you're not alone. And as you navigate the challenges that come up, there's folks that are going to celebrate with you. And that's kind of the part of joy. I think I find joy in being witnessed and witnessing
Mm-hmm.
myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I think community allows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that brings up a good point. And this is something that I feel like is a gap in my knowledge. I don't feel like I have a clear image of what celebration looks like. And like this idea of like, what does it look like to celebrate in community? But also, what does it look like to celebrate yourself like by yourself? And like how important is that to mental health? So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, I think. as young as for as long as I can remember, I've always been somebody who had some kind of journal or diary,
Mm-hmm.
or just something where I could just express. I would say that's one of my core values. And it's so funny. I'm getting ready to transition back to the States, and I
Mm-hmm.
counted how many journals I've had here in 3 years, and I
Mm-hmm.
have at least 8.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing. Is it everyday journaling?
um, I go through ebbs and flows. I do my
Uh-huh.
best at
Mm-hmm.
least multiple times a week. There have been moments where I've been more, it's been embedded in my routine at least 15 minutes. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's a bit more fluid. But around celebration and learning how to do that for myself, I
Mm-hmm.
think it really began post therapy, since starting therapy, which I've
Mm-hmm.
probably been at, I think, since college, so maybe about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think celebration has come from recognizing a kind of a rigidness, honestly, if I'm going to be super honest, like
Mm-hmm.
a rigidness around how I've treated myself and like
Mm-hmm.
needing to soften. And part of that has really been around celebrating the small.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this post literally before our call actually that talked about some of the awards that didn't exist, asking
Mm-hmm.
for help, doing things alone, people pleasing, um, you know, and those were things that I think I have spent my whole life chasing, these awards that don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the process of what that's done sometimes has really kind of, when we think about maybe some of the voices in our head, for me, it's kind of come out as a drill sergeant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody who's like, no, not this, or you did that wrong, or don't even think about it. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found since working with a therapist, it's really been more so highlighting more of the positive experiences,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and also like recognizing I've been able to look back at moments in my youth and recognize you took yourself way too seriously then. You were literally just a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as I think about my adult moment, I've recognized how writing has even helped, paired with therapy, has helped, like, I want to say, renovate my value system. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
I think I previously used to strive for excellence, and now
Mm-hmm.
it's more about progress.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, I've had therapists that have literally asked me, when thinking about, I would show up to sessions more so kind of like, so this is where I went wrong and this is what I learned about it. And kind of like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
okay, teacher, like this, I got this.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, um, they'll ask me, but how does that make you feel? Or um, I think about 3 months ago, we were talking about this topic, and look at you now, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
they encouraged this kind of softness, this move away from rigidity that helped during my process of journaling when I'm being overly kind of strict with myself. I've
Mm-hmm.
instead began to balance it with this is something that made me feel good. I also would share that I think the type of journaling that I've been able to do has also really helped my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that I really embedded into my routines as I've, you know, that are a bit more fluid have been primarily around gratitude and what that
Mm-hmm.
looks like. And for me, it's like as simple as waking up and being able to see like a sunrise or the stillness in the morning. And also thinking about what are the what progress have I made when I think about maybe something that I was nervous about or an
Mm-hmm.
opportunity that I was nervous to go for, I no
Mm-hmm.
longer placed gratitude or value or, all of the celebration.
Mm-hmm.
I no longer put that in actually getting that thing, but more so giving myself the opportunity because I
Mm-hmm.
know what it's like when you have thoughts around not being good enough or not being ready and actually choosing to not be the person to count yourself out.
Yeah, there's so much there that's so powerful. If you had to give like quick examples of like celebration activities, like do you have any like rituals like to celebrate with yourself or like in community? Like is it just that mental reframing or is it something like you kind of like journal and like you put like a star next to it so that you go back and you remember like it was like a happy moment or something. Do you have any like rituals in place to kind of like take these positive experiences and kind of like hold on to them so that when you experience something that is more challenging, you can go back and remind yourself, like, I've overcome this, I've overcome that. I think David Goggins calls it the cookie jar. So do you have any
Mm,
practices like that to remind yourself of how important it is to celebrate the good and to never let the bad outweigh it?
mm, yes. One thing that I currently do, um, because I'm usually on my computer, and I think
Hmm.
many people are,
Yeah.
I created a simple form on Google Forms that I call my wins log. Um,
Mm.
and as a business owner, it helps a lot because the entrepreneurship journey can be challenging. But I
Mm.
also have found that I have been able to, like, my jar is not exclusive. I don't
Mm.
think that we need um different types of cookie jars. So
Mm.
I've also been able to start adding celebrating boundaries that I've set,
Mm.
celebrating um ways that I have let responsible Sophie, right? Like that's what I call like the drill sergeant. Like when I allow them to take a walk and I do something that reminds me of that something that feels playful. Because for
Mm.
me, I was an older sister. I am, thankfully. Um,
Mm.
but there's so many ways where I can creep back into that rigidity. So that's one.
Mm.
There was a season in my life where I built a kind of like a check-in, like a monthly check-in. I used to call it
Mm.
mirror time. And I found an amazing quote by Audre Lorde, kind of
Mm.
four evaluation questions. A tip I got from Sabrina Hersey Isa, and basically I would journal monthly and I would talk about what are the things that I liked, what are the things that I want to start, stop, change. But that also
Mm.
was kind of this like written space, kind of more structured, that even allowed me to celebrate.
Mm.
Um, so there's been dedicated time. The other thing I love to celebrate too is just when I think about your journey, what does that look like? Fun
Mm.
fact about me, I love a half birthday. So I
Mm.
remember this actually was really powerful during the pandemic, 2020, on my half birthday. I'm a trivia lover. So, and I was thinking about the ways, um, like Black women have been underrepresented in
Mm.
trivia. So I designed a trivia game and invited some friends. And
Mm.
basically, my half birthday party had a meditation. I brought my friends together. We played, we talked, we laughed. And that
Mm.
was like, I think that was one of the biggest ways that I saw celebration
Mm.
being kind of woven into community that I really loved and wanted to
Mm.
continue.
I love that so much. And you bring up another huge topic, this idea of boundaries. And I think it's really important when we talk about community that we talk about boundaries and that we frame it from the perspective of what we do, even like with ourselves, like the boundaries we have with ourselves
Yeah.
affect the way we show up for other people. And I recently had someone on the show and she talked about this idea of an empowered woman. And she talks about how the boundaries you have with yourself impacts the way you interact with other people, and that if you don't have the boundaries with yourself, that like you're earning your own self-respect. Like I place this boundary, I maintain it, and like you know that you can trust that, then like you'll have like confrontation and boundaries with other people because you might place a boundary, but if you're not well versed in like holding up a boundary and like being committed to the boundary and like really like enforcing it in a way that is like with love, then like it's confrontational because people won't know like if you really mean something or if like a boundary is negotiable. And I think it's so important to talk about how can we keep and protect our energy when we are in community, and what does that look like when we're by ourselves and with people.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. One thing I would say is, you know, I loved what you shared with boundaries and setting them and thinking about um how to protect our energy. And I think part of it is kind of recognizing, I think it part of it is going through our own internal narrative around
Mm,
what is behind the boundary we're so focused on setting. Like
mm,
I especially when they're new behaviors,
mm,
right? Like for me, I've gone through that process of this is I feel like I've reached a time in my life where I'm setting more than I have ever. And part
mm,
of it is I learned the lessons. I saw what happened when I didn't.
mm,
And what I found actually has been recognizing the reason why I found boundary setting stressful in some times has been because I hadn't reassured myself that what my primary job is, and it's to take care of me at the
mm,
end of the day. And
mm,
recognizing that if that is my technically my only job, what does that mean for, you know, maybe the person on the other side who I might lose? Because typically I previously had put my value in them seeing something in me.
mm,
So when I think about energy protection, I think that comes from reassurance of ourselves about who's most important.
mm,
And I think that's us. And sometimes that can be hard to grapple with. But I feel like I have earned a degree in contortion,
mm. Mm,
bending in uncomfortable ways. I actually had a friend, she's skilled in Chinese medicine, and
mm,
she was helping me with like a shoulder pain I didn't even realize and how much she loosened
mm,
me. And
mm,
one of the things she said was, "You keep trying to do things even though it's not comfortable." I still remember that.
mm,
Literally, she's just rubbing my arm, and these are the words she's sharing. I didn't tell her anything. It's somebody who I hadn't seen in months, but
mm,
she was able to get that from my body. And when I think about protecting our energy, I think it really is rooted in, I think if I mo like s sooner had been able to recognize that I was the center of it all for myself,
mm,
and recognizing that my no is in service of me,
mm,
I think I wouldn't be as bent over as I've previously been, you know? So now, because I know that contortion, I felt it in my body. somebody read me and told me that this is like what is, you know, written essentially. Um, it's helped me really kind of reset when I think about the boundary, and also like I think also pairing it with recognizing that not everything should last forever. Let me know
Mm-hmm.
if you want. And by that, I think I mean boundaries can sometimes be hard in community because we want the community to stay the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
We like
Mm-hmm.
like the ways we felt held,
Mm-hmm.
we want that to last forever. But when we let go of that, recognizing that there's going to be moments where we need different things, and as we build our own security in ourselves, there's going to be a way where sometimes that can actually come into opposition with the way someone interacts with us.
Mm-hmm.
And should that dynamic need to shift, we have to prioritize ourselves there. But
Mm-hmm.
we can, but it's important to look at community with an open hand versus a closed hand.
Yeah, I something that you're touching on is this idea that community is static in our mind sometimes, and that we have one community, that this community, it has to be like this certain person, this person doing this role and that role. And so much of community is this fluid and dynamic interaction, and you can have a community in one place, a community in another place, especially like online. You could be a part of many communities. And I think it's so beautiful that so much of what you're saying is that it's really the personal growth we have inside that allows us to be empowered outside. And I actually had a really difficult time with boundaries, and had like a big awakening recently about this. And my coach Tom Bilyeu just said to me, you can't burn your flesh to keep others warm. And that was so powerful because
Mm,
I recognize that I just kept coming back to this idea that I felt responsible for other people's feelings. And when you like put it into words, you can see how it doesn't make sense. But when you're like in it, also like it's conditioning. So it's like immediately you think like you see someone suffering and it's like, how can I help? But sometimes it's like, no, like, how can you help them help themselves? And I think that is such a big thing that a lot of people don't talk about. And this idea that, like, communities, and this is something someone brought up to me, that communities don't need a leader all the time. And that sometimes this idea of communities is that everyone can lead in their own way, and that
mm.
they bring their own unique kind of like formula to it, and that everyone can lead in the aspect of like where their strengths are. And I think that's so beautiful, and that we can really learn from each other, and that like communities don't have to be hierarchical, and that like there doesn't have to be like one leader who has all the answers, and that like we really can be awakened by our openness to learn from other people. So I'd love to hear a little bit about this idea of personal growth, and what does it look like when you're committed to personal growth and also you're looking to build communities?
Yeah, yeah. Ooh, I sometimes I think about my love for personal growth, and I almost wondered like, have I always been wired this way? In my family, I have two younger brothers, and I've always kind of been a pioneer.
Mm-hmm.
Like the person who took a chance on different opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who was like naturally the first to try the thing, right? I was the first one that went away to college or went away to high school. And people got to learn from that, from
Mm-hmm.
that part. Um, I think this emphasis on personal growth, candidly, I think it started with me recognizing or having feelings of not being enough.
Mm,
For me,
mhm,
that's what it was rooted in, right? Like
mhm,
not being enough in terms of confidence or polish or needing to be more. So that's why
mhm,
I was so into growth.
mhm,
And as I said, like beginning to get into therapy and recognizing like how I was talking to myself and how I was my own worst enemy. And I would
mhm,
argue I still am, right? Like when it comes to the main opponent, it's ourselves. And for me, I think it's having kind of this compassionate voice in a therapist that really helped me recognize that one, you're not so far off. So, you
mhm,
are your story is powerful for what it is.
mhm,
Um, the way you look at the world, um, there's value there.
mhm,
Um, but part of this journey for me has really been personal growth, starting out as kind of being this way to attack myself. And now I'm looking at it as a way to reclaim my relationship with myself.
mm. Yeah, I always go back to this idea that in the self-development community, there's always like this culture of no matter how well you're doing, you could always do better. And like that constant striving can feel just so bottomless and empty. And I think it's so important that we have beliefs that empower us now and that remind us of how far we've come and that some moments aren't for striving and they're for living. And I really love that idea. And when I think about self-development and personal growth, I think so much of it is like it's expansive and it's not always this idea of like you're ascending to a better version of you, but it's like this idea that you're allowing for more of who you really are and that you're expanding who you are, your essence, and that kind of like authentic power, and you're not afraid to share it. And that when people meet you, they're not meeting this best version of you or the your next level, but they're meeting the who you really are and that you're not afraid to show that.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean, this that move that I made 3 years ago to Mexico, it really like post-pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
trying communities, uh, healing. I mean, I was at odds in a lot, at feeling at odds in my career, feeling at odds with my family at the time. And but I was still focused on
Mm-hmm.
personal growth. And what I realized was that harshness that I was
Mm-hmm.
treating myself with, and also recognizing, I think it also got to a point where I was like, if this is how I treat myself, what am I allowing others to do for me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How how would they treat me through this? And I think now, as I think about personal growth, really, I said previously, I am looking to reclaim my relationship with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Personal growth now looks like to me, how do I understand things that I couldn't see earlier because of this rigidity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's ways that I even receive my parents differently now
Mm-hmm.
because of just being able to recognize more of this human experience that literally
Mm-hmm.
all of us are living, irrespective of age,
Mm-hmm.
kind of role that they have in this life, in this society. Um,
Yeah, I think about that, and for me, I feel like I'm like the other side of the coin. I always think to myself that I'm actually like pretty kind to myself, but I am constantly thinking of like what's the worst thing someone's ever said to me, and like how can I protect myself. And like I'll put things out, and I'll be honest, like the copy, sometimes I'll think to myself, I'll change words because I'll be like, some person will say this or someone will say this. And I think it's good to be aware, and so that you can become like a better writer or better creator, but at the same time, it can't impact who you are as a person. Like it can impact your work to improve it, but it can't impact your self-worth. And for me, I think I definitely in the past felt like how good I was how useful I was to other people. And that took so much reprogramming. And even like this idea that I think it was like I was having someone over and they like canceled last minute. And I had gotten them like all this food that was just like totally decadent. Like I remember it was a gelato. I'm vegan now, but I wasn't then. It was like a gelato, and it was like it tasted so good. I had it because I was like, well, no one else is gonna eat it. So I remember having it and being like, this is the best thing I've ever tasted, and I didn't get it for myself.
Mm.
And that
Mm.
was like such a shift. And I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that information, but that is like something that is like so deep that I like was like, this is like a discovery, because so much of personal growth isn't always like what we can learn in a book. It's sometimes it's like actually having those realizations about ourselves. Like this is the best thing I ever tasted, and it wasn't, I didn't get it for me. And I remember thinking to myself, like, why would I go out of my way to pay extra for something just for someone to temporarily enjoy something more than they would with an alternative? And why wouldn't I do that for myself? And that was like such a powerful moment for me, because I think sometimes we can read in a book, we can listen to a podcast, we can we can do everything that's good for our like knowledge on this stuff, but at the end of the day, and this is what I love about journaling, if we're not asking ourselves these questions and looking inside for answers, we won't have that change.
Yeah. Yes. I'm sure that was the most delicious gelato ever. I am glad you didn't even wait for the next guest to come around, but you ate it yourself.
I didn't have a lot of guests, so there wasn't a next guest.
That's the
It,
win.
yeah, I'm not very social. But and also it was like I think it was maybe like right after the pandemic or something. So also like people weren't really like going out.
Right.
But yeah, I remember thinking to myself like, and I also wasn't in a place where I could like take that information and do something with it, because I was so like, I think so much of it like comes down to conditioning, like you say about how you realize this rigidity with your therapist, and that like sometimes we don't have a perspective of other people and how they see the world and how they treat themselves and what they're saying to themselves and the tone they're saying it in. And it can be hard for us to see the ways that sometimes we are our own worst enemy. And we don't like recognize that for other people, sometimes they could have more compassion, like when they talk to themselves, or this idea that sometimes our blind spots are things that we have to discover on our own or in community, and that the healing is for us to do, but it's so deeply influenced by the people we choose to be in community with.
Absolutely. I think the most powerful thing for me has been, and I think part of it I've been grateful for, it has been life, right? Like just
Mhm.
naturally in terms of as we grow and evolve, there's folks who like can't, who, whether it's by choice or capacity,
Mhm.
they no longer are around us, and that creates space for other people to come in. And I'm really
Mhm.
grateful because the people that I have around me right now
Mhm.
are ones that I think listen more than they speak. And I can tell you, for me, at the beginning, I was kind of like, how come she's not saying anything? How come she's not reacting? Like, if this were me, I would have done X, I would have emoted, I would, all of
Mhm.
these things. And I remember thinking, I think there's something wrong here. But those were the people I still kept trying to share space with.
Mhm.
And what I found was those that listen more than they speak, like in terms of my friendships, that has been invaluable because what I realized is they were actually giving me the gift of processing, just having that
Mhm.
time, just being there to showing up for me through presence and space, and also just like unconditional love in that way, right? Like
Mhm.
not needing that whatever advice they offered, not needing that to be the right thing, not needing to like tie up whatever I was coming to them with in a bow to feel
Mhm.
accomplished. It wasn't about feeling
Mhm.
accomplished, things that I had previously been attached to. And I think what I came to realize is by having more space where people would just listen, I realized for myself kind of the areas where I was blind. you know? Like there
Mhm.
didn't need to be a, well, of course this happened. You did this, this, and that, right? Like
Mhm.
in that own process of self-reflection, I was able to arrive at that. And I think the biggest win was more so like my answer started changing from, oh, I'm so dumb, or oh, I can't believe I did that, but more so, what's holding me back is I haven't been able to forgive myself. And that gets to be
Mhm.
the underline. It gets to be more about where, like, uncovering what I think tr giving myself or listening to myself out of curiosity, recognizing the moments where I'm stewing, where is that? And being able to
Mhm.
go to a friend and say, I'm upset about this.
Mhm.
And they hear me using the same term over and over. And their response is, what is it about this thing? Why does that
Mhm.
matter? And that being the place where
Mhm.
I get there, and just having somebody listen, and also me recognizing that the way they're treating you, that's how you get to treat yourself too. You
Mhm.
know, it's this it's this openness, it's this curiosity. And you know, there are no jail cells for feelings, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
this job you're playing as some kind of like officer, it can stop.
Mhm. 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 Yeah, because at that point, our feelings become our jail.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Or and I think even besides the feelings, more so like the our attitudes around it, right?
Mhm.
Like it not being okay to feel this, or like the shame, because we can't handle the shame, maybe we instead like choose to like suck ourselves into like make ourselves smaller.
Mhm.
Um that's I think community really has that opportunity. People say you are able to receive the like the the relationships you're ready for are the ones you attract.
Mhm.
And I can say I'm really grateful for the friendships that I have. because I think these are the prime relationships, the prime community that I have for the work, the self work that I'm doing now. It's one that is way more curious. And I think that also shows that this is my opportunity to be more curious with myself versus quick to judgment. Whereas I used to be in spaces where, it was always about, okay, what is this person that I'm sharing this going to say? That was kind of the main event.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas now it's about this exploratory process and seeing where I end up on the other side.
Mm-hmm. That is so beautiful. And I think sometimes the greatest gift we can give ourselves and other people is that our self-discoveries are our own journey. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a treat